What is up, takers? It is yours truly, Tyler Belts, and joining me today is nationally syndicated radio host and Black Information Network correspondent and host of Civic Cipher, Ramses. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ty. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to dive right in. If you can start by introducing yourself to our viewing audience and how you really got started in the media industry.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Ramses, and a little bit of background. I come from radio broadcasting, like terrestrial radio, FM broadcasting. I'm a hip hop broadcaster. Started in 2005. The short version of the story is I have an older brother who's an MC in a group called Dilated Peoples, and they would go on tour whenever they'd stop in Arizona, which is where I was going to school. I'd be at the shows. The radio folks would be at the shows. We ended up meeting. They asked if I was interested in maybe coming up and interning, and the rest is history. So I didn't go to broadcast school or anything cool like that. I just kind of was associated with the right folks. I had the right work ethic. I knew that I wanted it, and ultimately was able to turn that into a broadcasting career.
Absolutely. And then if I'm correct, born in Compton and then later in Arizona, correct?
Yeah. So exactly. I was born in Compton. And I moved to Arizona. It was a long time ago, but I grew up and was raised in Arizona. But my first few years of my life, I lived in Compton. I think I left maybe 7 or 8 years old. But to be honest, that very much shaped the outlook and the worldview that I had about me, because I never had to imagine what life was like for people who were less fortunate. Life was like for folks who were kind of underneath the boot of systemic oppression and systemic racism. I'd never had to imagine what life was like for folks relegated to the margins of society. And then moving to Arizona, where there were less in the way of traumatic happenings and more in the way of opportunities, certainly for me and for my family, I was able to kind of see both sides and speak to both sides of the experience that folks might have in this country.
Absolutely. And can we dive in a little bit more about those experiences and how those have kind of shaped and molded you to the creative and to the talent that you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So, not to get too heavy, but, I remember seeing my friend I used to play with, his big brother was shot and killed in front of my house. And the first time I saw a dead body, this person who I seen and looked up to was laying flat on the street, in the middle of the street. It was such a weird, because you're used to seeing people walk around and being animated, and you see like a human form in a place where it doesn't belong. This wasn't in a bed like a sleeping bed. It was on the sidewalk. So, that I was in a house fire. There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of things that were taking place there. I grew up poor. And that's part of the reason why we ended up having to move to Arizona. Being in Arizona, I learned that, this place where Black people were a statistical minority, yet, being in a field like broadcasting radio, that, hip hop broadcasters had to program hip hop stations, which for all intents and purposes was Black culture. In a city where Black people themselves were statistically irrelevant. So you see at that intersection, there was a lot of decisions being made that weren't necessarily good for Black people. It was good for business. It was good for the immediate population, but you end up taking a version of Black culture and then pitching it to an entire city and them interpreting that as this is what Black people are, when you're just taking a facet, a caricature of Black culture, and then imposing that on a population. And so it was at that intersection where I learned, how business decisions are made, how people who are well-intentioned, well-meaning folks can be, blinded by their own privilege, and where, again, systemic issues and systemic elements creep into the conversation. And, people need to represent the interests of the people who are being used and profited from. So those and a number of other things I've learned over the course of a long career, but it would take all day to give you all the lessons I've learned. So you can listen to my show. I do talk about some of them on my show. So But yeah.
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing those experiences, or even, like you said, a glimpse of those, because I couldn't even imagine that. And I think it's even a conversation that I have with people all the time. It's so important to recognize your privilege, and your story is so much different than anybody else's. And I feel like a lot of times people don't grasp that, or it's these hard or these tough conversations that affect us in our communities daily, that people prefer or tend to avoid or go the other direction, because it's simply just easier than to have tough conversations to continue creating awareness. I want to talk a little bit about what has been some of your biggest challenges and obstacles. For me, I've been in the game for a couple years, hosting my own podcast, doing interviews independently. But with just like the way the industry is currently going, what advice would you give to like those out there that may be aspiring to be an on-air personality or to be a podcast host?
Sure. Well, the advice I would start there, the advice that I would give to anybody who's trying to do something like this is, before anything, make sure you do your research. We have to do research, and even we get it wrong sometimes, right? But our listeners know that we do our best to go through, and make sure that we know what we're talking about, because when you're misinformed and then you misinform, your listenership, it erodes whatever trust you've been able to build there. Outside of that, start now with what you have and do what you can. That would probably be the strongest piece of advice. The next piece would be do everything. You might think that you want to be a podcaster, but TikTok might be your platform, and you're focusing so much on your podcast and not focused on TikTok. And when TikTok blows up, you're not optimized to deal with that. So you need to have, TikTok, you need to have YouTube, you need to have, everything in person, all of these things. You need to have a multifaceted approach. As time continues to pass, I'm seeing people who were once television personalities or once radio broadcasters or once live event hosts. Now they are media people, and they have to do everything because media exists across all platforms. Really, social media ended up being kind of the bridge that connected all these various media channels into really and it packaged it in such a way to where now it can exist underneath a brand. So if you have a brand, for example, Ty's Take Today, and you have everything under that, your TikTok and your YouTube and all that sort, and you pay attention and you put content up on each of those platforms, and that's the best strategy for anybody who's getting started. As far as challenges, you'll run into yourself. You'll be the biggest obstacle because everything starts slow. You'll put up content and it'll get 6 likes and 30 views, and you can't be discouraged by that. You just keep throwing shots into the algorithm. Eventually something will pick up. If not, then keep refining your approach. Other obstacles are people in positions of power. They'll tell you what they want. They'll try to change your messaging, so forth and so on. So it's important to know what you're doing, stand on it, register your IP, make sure you own your brand. That costs money. Equipment costs money. Sometimes you have to pay for services to promote your stuff, and that costs money too. So, cultivating a relationship with your base to where you get donations or, people are willing to pay for your content and support you early on. Those will help with a lot of the challenges that are on that path.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit more. You've been recognized by several prestigious institutions such as the NAACP. Can you tell us a little bit about how you felt being recognized with these honors and accolades?
Sure. The NAACP is, as you can imagine, that's a great honor. It feels like validation because, everybody has their own insecurities. Everybody's wondering if they're doing enough. And being a person that has, a platform and where people come and listen to my radio show every week, you don't really get to interact with your listeners all that much. And so you're just doing your best and hoping for the best. But when the NAACP says, hey, we've seen what you've been doing, we'd like to honor you, give you an award, give you a microphone and an audience so you can tell your story. That's energizing and invigorating, and it just encourages you to continue to do the work. And they're not the only ones. We've gotten a decent amount of flowers so far, both Q Ward and myself. And so, that's critically important and encouraging. And since we're trying to do good work, oftentimes we have to accept that in lieu of like bigger paychecks, because if we were doing regular hip hop broadcasting or, following a different, career path that wasn't as noble and wasn't as people focused, then there would be money and we wouldn't need the accolades as much. But we feel like this is really the purpose in our lives. And so when people acknowledge that, especially entities like the NAACP, again, it's very encouraging.
All right, Ramses. Now, can you tell us more about the Black Information Network Daily podcast and how that project launched and the idea and vision behind that?
Yeah. So Black Information Network is a subsidiary of iHeartMedia, and it's basically a network of radio stations in markets where Black people are statistically relevant. And it's a news network. So stories that you won't hear on CNN, stories that Black people might find relevant to, their lives and things that they're sensitive to. They were looking to break into the podcasting space because they needed to exist in a digital environment as well. And the president of the Black Information Network heard about my radio show, Civic, Cipher, and reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in taking a position. And I was, but I knew that Civic Cipher was something that I had to do. And so we ended up working it out to where iHeart could provide some syndication opportunities for Civic Cipher so that we'd be on more stations. And I would host their Black Information Network Daily podcast. So it's basically news recaps and interviews with, politicians or leaders of industry, or, sometimes it's just my own personal thoughts that I feel that the listenership can use to, make some determinations on their own. But it's a great show, I believe, of course, I'm in my biased opinion. And we have a great audience, and we have some solid numbers too. So again, Black Information Network Daily podcast. If you want to listen to it, you can get the iHeartRadio app and just check out the Black Information Network. You'll see me and my afro there, and you can click and subscribe. So yeah.
Absolutely. We will be sure to post all of that information as well in the description so that our takers and our audience can check you out and listen. And I just have to tell you, this whole studio setup, I need to get on your level. So I'm going to have to reach out to you off air and see how I can get it. Because this background is just, it's too bland. I need to get on your level.
Yeah. Easy call. I got you.
Absolutely. So I want to dive in a little bit more about some of the key issues that impact you, or just issues that are impacting you and your community, and or even just topics that you feel very strongly and passionate about.
Sure. Well, like other communities, some of the issues that we face include disinformation campaigns. There are a lot of people who are subjected to, bots and online misinformation and on and on and on. Of course, there's voter suppression initiatives that we continually fight back against as Black people and as marginalized people. So a misinformed population that has a tough time voting will have their interest misrepresented in the political arena. So those are two things that are of critical importance. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we're up against some systemic issues as a people. Those include, environmental racism, unfair judicial sentencing. We're still recovering from land theft. We're still recovering from redlining. We're still recovering from, the war on drugs, and continue to recover from that. We are having to push back against attacks on CRT, attacks on affirmative action or diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We have to deal with healthcare disparities. We have to deal with environmental racism. We have to deal with, there were so many areas in this country's history that left Black people out of the conversation. And as a result, we were unable to accumulate wealth. Those areas include, the New Deal. They include the Black codes. I mentioned land theft, but there's also like tax theft. We just did a Way Black History Fact discussing a $600 billion robbery of Black Americans over a course of 150 years, of towns being stolen under the guise of, taxation and foreclosures and things like this. And that has led to wealth inequality. And so now we're dealing with economic disenfranchisement and the housing, not housing, but employment opportunities. I already said housing, but then that, we can have a conversation about educational inequities and so forth. And so there's a lot of things that Black people are dealing with in this country. And, a convenient argument is to say, stop listening to hip hop music and there won't be any crime. And that's willfully ignorant, because, poverty begets crime. And again, economic empowerment is a better way to take on that, not, giving more money to police so they can buy tanks to shoot us. We're not inherently bad people. No one is. We are people with what opportunities are available to us if we're dealing with the data. And you could look at individual examples of people being successful, but when you're dealing with data, you have to adopt a systemic approach because we're looking at a system in play.
Absolutely. And I know in a previous episode and conversation on your platform, you guys discussed the senseless death of Sonia Massey. And I feel like as an independent journalist, we are constantly reporting on these senseless shootings, and the numbers and, statistics are just continuing to be at an all-time high. What at this point, in your eyes and your vision, needs to be done? Because it's overall exhausting for us as journalists and media personalities and everybody. Like, this should be an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have an answer, and I think we've had an answer for some years now. There are some people who don't like to hear it and some people who just believe it. Defunding the police. When I first heard that, obviously it was alarming, because defunding the police almost sounds like abolishing the police. And there are certainly calls for that too. But, one foot in front of the other, you see what works, you see what doesn't work, and you go from there. But the idea behind defunding the police, of course, is that you, rather than spending more money on police so that they can respond to crimes, often unprepared, and to crimes that really don't qualify as crimes. Mental health crisis isn't a crime. There are certain things that just it's not crime, but people show up to the situation to get a cat out of a tree, say, for instance, with a gun. And a gun's only purpose is to end the life, right? So rather than spending all this money on police, you can spend money on programs that economically empower people who are poor in poor neighborhoods and poor environments. You could spend money on other programs that are adjacent to policing that can respond to calls like Sonia Massey's call, where maybe you don't need aggressive police presence there. You just need someone to check on the perimeter of someone's house to make sure everything is okay and the woman inside is safe and sound. Someone doesn't need to show up with a murder weapon and, aggressive tendencies. There's also things about, police hiring practices, because police do tend to hire and put together advertising that appeals to folks who have, aggressive tendencies, and, the Punisher logo and, all that sort of stuff that type of person responds to. Then they get the job, and then they behave in a way that causes the police department to get sued for wrongful death and cast the police in a bad light. And then the taxpayers have to put the bill for that. So again, for folks that are afraid of defunding the police, I'd imagine researching a little bit more, because it doesn't necessarily mean anarchy. It just means we need something that prevents crime, and police don't prevent crime. They only respond to it. And indeed, in many instances, make it worse. And because we have not conceived of another reality, we can only respond initially with fear, because defund the police sounds scary on its face, but rightfully so, because it was meant to scare people into investigating it, and not enough people have.
Absolutely. And Ramses, with the current political climate and the current state of our nation as a whole, I have these conversations with people all the time. I try to use my platform to encourage people, like we said earlier, to research your local candidates, research your city council, research the proposals that are being put on the table. And I still have these conversations with people that will tell me, "Oh, I've never went to the polls. I've never casted my ballot or my vote." Why is it now so important more than ever for anybody, for everybody to go out there and cast your vote and do the research?
Yeah, well, from my understanding, the last election, more people voted in the last election than any other point in time in history, because it was that important. It's still that important. In fact, it's more importanter. Because, where we are is, on the cusp of a second Trump presidency, or a first, woman minority presidency, black woman, I should say, because she is a black woman. And those two presidencies look very different. One of them is will be helped framed by Project 2025. And I'm sure you've heard of Project 2025, but if you haven't, take a look at it. If that's the world you want to live in, either vote for that candidate, Donald Trump, or don't vote. Those are your options. For folks who feel like Project 2025 is going to be bad for themselves or their brothers and sisters who are from minority communities or marginalized communities, for those who feel like that might be bad for the country and really the type of nation that we can be and are aspiring to be and have been aspiring to be, then you have a vote for Kamala Harris that needs to be cast. One of those two people will be the president. There's no two ways about it. And your vote does matter. There's no two ways about that either. And you showing up and taking the time to invest a vote in your future and the future of those people that you know and love is not a big ask, especially because it is our civic duty and all the rest of us are going to do it as well. So take a moment, learn about the candidates from scholarly journalistic sources, and then vote accordingly. It's very simple.
Absolutely. And now this is kind of like a triple question, if you will.
Sure.
Do you have a specific or particular message to either those that are contemplating running for office in any position in their community, or for those that are currently in office serving the people?
Well, for those who are interested in running for office, I say, do it. There's no better way to show how engaged you are. There's no better way to shape your reality. There's no better way to share what you believe your vision for your society is than in the political arena. And if you feel like you have the political sophistication, then go for it. If you feel like you don't have the political sophistication, all you have to do is look around, because there's a lot of people in elected positions that are not smart. They don't know what the nature of their job is. They don't know how to do their job. And they are just fear mongers who happen to whip up enough fear to get enough votes to be in the office to mess things up for everyone. And if they can do it, you absolutely can do it. And if they are limp-wristed in their approach to changing their society, then you, full of enthusiasm and vigor, can do even more. And for folks that are in office right now, I say, keep the faith. We're all here. Work on your messaging. Understand that disinformation and misinformation exists. And so you have to put that out, stomp that out as often as you can. Make sure that you're communicating clearly and effectively and frequently, because misinformation and disinformation moves faster than any of us would have ever imagined. And staying on top of that is critical. And, stay the course. Like I said, we have a long road, even if we do, make it in this next election season. Those of us who feel like a more progressive agenda and a more liberal agenda is appropriate for this country. That means that the work just starts there. It's not over. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that everyone has an equitable go in this society and that we treat each other more like brothers and sisters, more like we should. And I do believe in that vision. I do believe it's possible. And you elected officials are in the best position to help us toward that end.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And then this may be a little far-fetched, but I do have to ask, and I also want to just thank you again for using your voice and for all of the activism work that you do on your platform and through all these various outlets. So I do want to thank you and recognize you for those actions and using your voice for change. Could we ever see Ramses Ja in a political position? Have you ever?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that that's something that is going to happen in like the next year. You know, I have a ton of work that I still need to do and a ton of things I still want to accomplish as a broadcaster. We have some amazing opportunities in front of us, Q and I, and we are definitely giving 100% of our focus and our energy to those opportunities. But in the future, you know, again, I believe in what this country can be. And why would I not want to be an active participant toward that end? So yeah, you know, you never know what'll happen. I'm not actively pursuing it, but if the opportunity presented itself, sure, why not?
Absolutely. So we'll have to just wait and see where this course and where your journey continues.
I'm waiting and seeing with you. So
all right, and we will be there all the way for that journey.
Right.
I do want to talk a little bit about, you know, being vulnerable, and I'm a real big advocate for mental health. And I know there's, you know, sometimes there's a stigma when it comes to, you know, real men don't show their emotions or real men don't cry. And statistically, I just want to point out that according to the 2021 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, of the 21% of Black and African Americans who have had a mental condition or a mental health concern, only 39% of those individuals actually received mental health services. So I want your opinion and perspective on mental health and what we can do to in a sense break that stigma.
Yeah. So whereas people with means and opportunities and resources might have, you know, mental health issues and can seek out, you know, again, resources to help them out. Oftentimes, marginalized communities, you find that people will self-medicate, and that is a dangerous slope. That's a slippery slope, and it often leads to further criminalization of these people who have health issues. But you know, obviously, we're in a society because of how we exalt the police. We treat health issues like they're criminal issues, and we arrest these people. And put them into institutions that don't provide help for mental conditions. And they end up getting lost in that cycle of poverty, homelessness, and the carceral system. And they inflate the data that misrepresents the true nature of Black people and other marginalized people. For folks that are dealing with mental health problems, you know, I can't offer too much in the way of advice outside of do your best, because nobody wakes up and says, well, I have a mental health issue, I'm not going to do anything about it. You know, my heart goes out to you. In terms of the stigma, of course, we are continuing the work on the fact that there should be no stigma about expressing how you feel. I am a crier, as it turns out. Started doing Civic Cipher, and you know, when I had to tell the Sonia Massey story, I lost it twice during that conversation with Q. It's a sad story. You know, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus is what she said. And I come from church, so I know that that's a harmless thing to say to a person. It's a very scary thing to say to the demon that you're actually speaking to. The person is a child of God. So you don't rebuke the person, you rebuke the demon inside the person. For those that don't come from that faith tradition, that may not make sense, but suffice it to say, it's not an insult. And she was shot in the face and died there on the floor. And it's a very sad thing for a human being to have to endure. And to just know that that's the reality that I live in, that I'm raising my children in. It's very sad. And so expressing emotions has become part and parcel to our program. And we hope to be the example for other people who recognize that emotions are a part of who they are, and expressing them should be a part of their human experience as they, continue to live their lives. We're human beings. That's what we do. So there should be no stigma, and there should be no concern about getting help if you become overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And again, I just want to reiterate that on our platform, even, and I'm a very emotional person, and I've learned over the course of years, to sometimes, like, when somebody asks you, how's your day going, or how are you, like, I used to work at Target, so I used to be like, I used to call it the Target smile, and you just be like, oh, I'm good, and keep it moving. But I think showing your emotions is a sign of strength. Mm-hmm. And if we can break that stigma and let people know that, like you said, we're all humans at the end of the day, I think it's very important to be in tune and in touch with your emotions and the way you're feeling.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so before we get out of here, Ramses, how do you plan to leave a legacy or to inspire others out there?
Well, that's another good question. I promised my sons that at the end of my life, when they bury me, that they will be able to say he was a good man and he did right by us. I promised the same thing to my sisters and the people closest to me. At the end of my life, you'll be able to say he was a good man and he did right by us. He did his job. And my job, as I see it, and that's very important, as I see it, at present, is to continue to create episodes of Civic Cipher, continue to grow Civic Cipher into something that's trusted, something that is a sort of a cultural watering hole, something that empowers allies to Black and Brown and other marginalized communities, and change the world. Why not? Other people have had bigger aspirations, so why shouldn't I be a person that can change the world? I feel like legacy is important, but it's not everything. One day the sun's going to explode. So what's a legacy worth, really? The spirit that inhabits my body, the consciousness that I have, that was given to me by our common creator, whoever you decide that is something that we all share. And I will spend my time doing my best to be a better brother to my brothers and sisters and siblings that, I share time and space with. And if there's a legacy in there somewhere, I'll take it. But at the end of the day, I want to be a good man because, for the folks that will remember me, I want them to know that I did right by them, and that's enough for me.
Absolutely. Once again, nationally syndicated radio host, Black Information Network, and host of Civic Cipher, Ramses Ja. Thank you so much again for joining us, and I look forward to all of the amazing things that the universe is forthcoming in your direction. And again, thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Before I go, if you want to give us a follow or tap in with us, you can find us at civiccipher.com. We're on all social media at Civic Cipher. If you want to tap in with me personally, I'm at Ramses Ja on all platforms. Q Ward is I am Q Ward. He's got a lot to say. That's my partner in crime, the other half of my brain. We don't know you yet, but we love you, and you're welcome at our table, and we hope to hear from you soon. And thank you so much, Ty, for your time. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Ramses Ja, and we'll be back with more interviews very soon.